the night Thai people believe the Naga releases fireballs from the river. Chapter 1. The river I thought was only water. Before I came to Thailand, I thought the Mekong River was only a river. A long one, yes. A famous one. A river that appeared in documentaries, travel books, and maps printed in pale blue lines. But still, in my mind, it was only water. Water moving from one country to another. Water carrying boats, fish, mud, and reflections of the sky. I did not know that for many Thai people, especially in the quiet northeastern towns along its banks, the river was also memory. It was belief. It was a doorway. And on one particular night each year, people gathered beside it not simply to watch something strange, but to wait for something sacred. They called it Bang Phai Phaya Naga, the Naga Fireballs. I first heard about them from a Thai friend in Bangkok. We were sitting in a small cafe near the river, listening to rain tap softly against the windows. She told me that red glowing balls sometimes rose from the Mekong on the night of OK Phansa, the end of Buddhist Lent. I smiled politely. "You mean fireworks?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, not fireworks." "Lanterns?" "No." "Then what?" She looked out at the rain for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. Some people say science, some people say mystery, but many people believe the Naga sends them up from the river. I laughed quietly, not because I wanted to be rude, but because I did not know how else to respond. A serpent under the river, fireballs rising into the sky, a whole town waiting in silence. It sounded like a beautiful folktale, something made for children, something people no longer truly believed. At least that was what I thought. A few weeks later, I found myself on a night train heading northeast toward Nong Khai. The train moved slowly through the dark body of Thailand. Bangkok had disappeared behind me. The tall buildings, the traffic lights, the restless hum of the city, all of it faded into a softer world. Outside my window, the night spread open. Rice fields slept under moonlight. Small stations appeared and vanished. Sometimes I saw a single lamp glowing beside a wooden house. Sometimes I saw nothing at all, only darkness and the faint reflection of my own face in the glass. The train rocked gently. Metal wheels sang over the tracks. A woman across the aisle unwrapped sticky rice from a banana leaf and ate it slowly with grilled chicken. The smell was warm and smoky. Somewhere behind me, a child slept against his grandmother's shoulder. I had brought a notebook, planning to write down facts, dates, explanations, local opinions. I was a travel writer from England, and I like to understand things clearly. But that night, as the train carried me farther from the city, clarity began to feel less important. The darkness outside was too wide. The rhythm of the train was too calm. And the story of the river began to enter me slowly, like mist. By morning, Nong Khai was quiet and golden. The air felt different from Bangkok. Softer, wider. There was space between sounds. Motorbikes passed without hurry. Monks walked along the road with orange robes folded neatly over one shoulder. A dog slept in front of a shop selling noodles. Above everything, the sky looked pale and open. My guest house stood near the Mekong. From the balcony, I could see the river moving slowly, brown and silver under the morning light. Across the water was Laos, close enough to see trees and rooftops, yet somehow far enough to feel like another dream. The river did not look magical. That was my first thought. It looked calm, ordinary, a little muddy. A fisherman stood knee-deep near the bank, pulling in a net with quiet patience. A longtail boat moved across the current, its engine making a low wooden sound. Birds flew over the water. I leaned on the balcony railing and tried to imagine fire rising from that surface. I could not. Later that afternoon, I walked to the riverside promenade. Vendors were beginning to set up for the festival. Plastic chairs appeared in rows, food carts opened their metal lids, smoke from grilled fish drifted into the warm air. Someone was slicing papaya for samtam, the knife tapping quickly against the green fruit. There was the smell of lemongrass, charcoal, fried garlic, river mud after rain. Children ran between adults carrying mats and bags of snacks. Old people chose places near the water and sat down early, as if they knew that waiting was part of the ritual. The atmosphere surprised me. I had expected excitement, noise, a crowd chasing spectacle. But what I found was gentler than that. People were preparing for a night of watching, a night of patience, a night when the river might or might not reveal something. Near a small food stall, I met a man named Samchai. He was in his late 60s with silver hair, kind eyes, and a slow smile that seemed to arrive only after he had truly considered something. He was selling grilled sticky rice on bamboo sticks. The rice was pressed flat, brushed with egg, and turned over charcoal until the edges became crisp. I bought one. It was warm in my hand. "You come for fireballs?" he asked in English. "Yes," I said. "I'm writing about them." He nodded. "Many people write." "Do you believe in them?" He looked toward the Mekong. Then he smiled. "I believe in the river." It was not the answer I expected. I waited for him to continue. He turned the sticky rice slowly over the fire. "When I was young," he said, "my father brought me here. No big festival then, not many tourists, just villagers. We sat quietly, very dark, no phones, no cameras, only river. And did you see them?" He nodded. "One, maybe two. Red light, rising from water, very fast. Then, gone. Were you afraid?" "No." "Why not?" "Because everyone was calm." He handed another bamboo stick to a customer, then looked back at me. When people around you are not afraid, you learn not to be afraid. I wrote that sentence in my notebook. When people around you are not afraid, you learn not to be afraid. As the sun lowered, the Mekong changed color. The brown water became bronze, then rose, then deep blue. The opposite bank softened into shadow. Small boats turned on their lights. The first stars appeared faintly above the river. By then, thousands of people had gathered. Families sat on mats. Teenagers held phones ready. Grandmothers prepared fruit for children. Monks stood quietly near the back of the crowd. Some people chatted. Some prayed. Some simply watched the water. I sat beside Samchai and his wife Mali, who had brought a small basket of food from home. She offered me sticky rice, boiled eggs, and a little packet of chili paste. "You eat," she said. "Thank you." She smiled. "You cannot wait for Naga with empty stomach." I laughed softly. The sentence felt funny, but also strangely serious. The sky darkened. Across the river, lights from houses in Laos shimmered in the water. A breeze moved over the crowd. For a while, nothing happened. No music, no announcement, no dramatic countdown. Just the river, just the night, just thousands of faces turned toward the same dark surface. I began to feel restless. My Western mind wanted something to occur on schedule. If a festival promised mystery, then mystery should appear. If people had traveled for hours, the river should perform. But the Mekong did not hurry. It moved at its own pace. Beside me, Samchai sat with his hands folded. Molly leaned against a cushion. A child nearby fell asleep before anything happened. I whispered to Samchai, "What if no fireballs come tonight?" He did not look disappointed. "Then we come again next year." "That's all?" He nodded. "That's all." I looked at him. "You don't feel cheated?" He smiled in the darkness. "No, we are not buying ticket from river." That made me laugh quietly. He laughed too, but only a little. Then he said something I would remember for a long time. Some people come to see proof. Some people come to remember wonder. Different heart, different night. The crowd grew quieter. The river became almost black. Then, sometime after sunset, a sound moved through the people. Not a scream. Not exactly a cheer. More like one breath shared by many bodies. A red light had risen from the water. Small, round, silent. It lifted quickly into the dark, glowing for only a few seconds before disappearing. I froze. People around me pressed their palms together. Some whispered. Some smiled. Some simply watched. A boy pointed at the place where the light had been. His grandmother gently lowered his hand, as if reminding him to be respectful. I stared at the river. My mind searched for explanations. A flare. A reflection. A trick of distance. Something from the other side. Something human. Something simple. But the strange thing was this. In that exact moment, Explanation did not arrive first. Wonder did. Not belief, not certainty. Wonder. A quiet opening in the chest. A feeling I had not expected. Another red light rose farther downstream, then vanished. The crowd breathed again. I looked at Somchai. He was not surprised. He was not performing faith for me. He was simply watching the river the way one watches an old friend. Molly closed her eyes briefly and bowed her head. I did not know what she was praying. I did not ask. The night continued. Sometimes the river was still. Sometimes people murmured. Sometimes a light appeared, and everyone turned toward it like flowers turning toward the sun. I had come to Thailand thinking the story was about whether the fireballs were real. But sitting there beside the Mekong, I began to understand that for many people, the deeper question was not only what rose from the river, it was what rose inside the people who watched. Patience, memory, faith, community. The willingness to sit in darkness together without demanding that the world explain itself immediately. Much later, when the crowd began to thin, I walked back along the riverside. Food stalls were closing. Children slept in their parents' arms. The smell of charcoal still lingered in the cool air. Across the Mekong, the lights of Laos trembled softly on the water. Somchai walked beside me for a while. "So?" he asked. "You see?" "Yes," I said. "You understand?" I hesitated. "No." He laughed gently. "Good." "Good?" "Yes. Some things, first night, you should not understand too fast." We stopped near a tree wrapped with colored cloth. The river moved quietly below us. Somchai pointed toward the dark water. In Thailand, sometimes belief is not about forcing you to agree. It is invitation. You sit, you watch, you listen. Maybe your heart becomes softer. I closed my notebook. For the first time that night, I did not want to write. I only wanted to listen. The Mekong whispered in the dark, and somewhere beneath its slow surface, whether in myth, memory, or mystery, the Naga remained, not proven, not disproven, simply present, like a story waiting patiently for morning. Chapter 2: The Night of Waiting. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The room was still dark. Only a thin gray line showed behind the curtains, and somewhere outside, a rooster called into the quiet. For a few moments, I did not remember where I was. Then I heard the river, not loudly, not clearly, but there was a softness in the air, a wide breathing silence that told me the Mekong was nearby. I stepped onto the balcony with a cup of instant coffee from the guest house lobby. The river was covered in morning mist. Laos had almost disappeared. The opposite bank looked like a dream someone had not finished drawing. A monk walked slowly along the riverside road, his bare feet silent against the pavement. A woman placed food into his bowl and bowed her head. The monk blessed her in a low voice that blended with the first birdsong of the day. I watched from above, feeling strangely quiet. The night before had followed me into the morning. The red lights, the crowd, the way everyone had waited. The way no one seemed angry when nothing happened for long stretches of time. Back home in England, waiting usually meant impatience. A delayed train, a slow line, a late appointment. But here, waiting beside the Mekong had felt different. It had felt almost like listening. After breakfast, I returned to Somchai's stall. He was already there, preparing sticky rice beside a small charcoal fire. Molly sat nearby, folding banana leaves with careful fingers. "You sleep well?" Somchai asked. "Yes," I said, "but I kept thinking about last night." He smiled. "Good river follows you." I sat on a low plastic stool. "Can I ask something?" "Ask." "Why do people believe the Naga sends the fireballs?" Somchai did not answer immediately. He picked up a piece of charcoal and placed it gently into the stove. Then he said, "Because this river is not empty." I looked toward the Mekong. He continued, "Long time ago, before roads, before cars, river was everything. Food, travel, border, story, danger, life. People looked at river every day. They respected it." Molly added softly, "When something gives life, people do not see it as only thing. Only thing." The phrase stayed with me. In my old way of thinking, a river was water. A tree was wood. A mountain was stone. But in Thailand, I was beginning to notice that many things were not only things. A river could be ancestor. A tree could be home to spirit. A temple bell could be sound and blessing at the same time. Somchai pointed to the water. Naga lives in stories of many people near Mekong. Thailand, Laos, many places. Some say Naga protects Buddhism. Some say Naga lives underwater. Some say Naga is symbol. Symbol of what? He thought for a moment. Power under calm surface. I looked at the Mekong again. It moved slowly, almost lazily. But I remembered how wide it was, how deep it could be, how many lives depended on it. Power under calm surface. That afternoon, Somchai invited me to visit a nearby temple. It stood on a small hill above the river, its roof shining gently in the sun. The steps were guarded by long Naga figures, their bodies curling along both sides like green and gold waves. I had seen Naga statues before in Thailand, at temple staircases, on bridges, at entrances, but I had never really looked at them. Their faces were fierce, but not evil. Their mouths opened as if breathing out protection. Their scales caught the light. Their bodies seemed to connect the earth below with something higher above. A young monk named Fra Anan met us near the temple hall. His English was simple but clear. "You are writing about fireballs?" he asked. "Yes," he smiled. "Many people ask if real. And what do you say?" He looked toward the river. I say, "What kind of real?" I did not know how to answer. He continued gently. "If you see light, that is one real. If people gather with family, that is also real. If old story teaches respect, that is also real." Inside the temple, the air was cool. The floor shone under my feet. Golden Buddha images sat quietly beneath soft light. A few people knelt in prayer. Outside, wind moved through the trees. Fra Anan showed me a painting on the wall. It showed the Buddha seated in meditation, protected by a great Naga whose hood spread above him like a shelter. "This story is important," the monk said. When the Buddha meditated, rain came. The Naga protected him. So in many places, Naga is connected with protection and devotion. I stood before the painting for a long time. The image was calm, not frightening, not dramatic. The serpent was not a monster. It was guardian. That surprised me. In many Western stories, serpents often carried fear or temptation. But here, the Naga could be protector, bridge, and symbol of hidden wisdom. Outside, the afternoon light softened. We sat beneath a tree, while temple bells moved gently in the wind. Fra Anan said, "Some visitors want only answer. Natural gas, chemical, people, trick, maybe, maybe not. But Thai people can hold many layers." Many layers? Yes. Science can ask one question. Faith can ask another. Culture asks another. Family memory asks another. He smiled. If you use only one question, you may miss the story. That evening, the riverside was busy again. More people had arrived. The road smelled of grilled chicken, fried noodles, sweet coconut pancakes, and damp earth. Vendors called softly to customers. Children carried glowing toys. Old men sat on plastic chairs, discussing where the lights had appeared in previous years. I bought a bowl of noodle soup from a woman named Dao. Steam rose into my face. The broth smelled of garlic, coriander, and pepper. Dao noticed my notebook. "You journalist?" she asked. "Writer." "Ah, you write good thing?" "I hope so." She laughed. "Then write this. Thai people like mystery, but we also like eating." She handed me extra herbs. Festival cannot be festival without food. I asked her if she believed in the Naga. She shrugged, smiling. "I believe my grandmother believed. That is enough for me." Her answer was so simple that I nearly missed its beauty. Belief, I realized, was not always a hard statement. Sometimes it was inheritance. A warm bowl passed from one generation to another. A story kept alive because someone loved the person who first told it. As darkness returned, I found my place near Somchai and Mali again. The river looked different now. Last night, I had watched it like a stranger. Tonight, I watched it with a little more humility. I knew I did not understand, and for once, that felt acceptable. A boy sat beside his grandfather nearby. "Grandpa," he whispered in Thai, and then repeated in English for my benefit, "Will the Naga come?" The grandfather smiled. "Maybe." "Why maybe?" "Because sacred things do not obey children." The boy frowned. "Or adults?" the grandfather added. The boy thought about that. Then he leaned against him and watched the water. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. The crowd waited. The night deepened. A dog barked somewhere behind us. A boat engine faded in the distance. The moon rose higher. Then suddenly, a red ball of light appeared far downriver. It rose from the dark surface, silent and bright, then disappeared. The crowd exhaled. Another appeared. Then another. People pointed, but not wildly. Some pressed their hands together. Some smiled as if greeting an old friend. I felt the same quiet opening in my chest. Still no certainty. Still no explanation. But certainty seemed less important now. I looked at the faces around me. The old, the young, the skeptical, the faithful, the tired vendors, the children trying not to fall asleep. All of them looking in the same direction. All of them sharing one river. And I began to understand that the fireballs were not only lights in the sky, they were an occasion for belonging, a reason for people to return home, a reason for grandparents to tell stories, a reason for a town to remember that the world was still allowed to contain wonder. Later that night, as I walked back to the guest house, Molly gave me a small packet of sticky rice wrapped in banana leaf. For late night, she said, "Thank you. You write too much, eat also." Somchai laughed. The river beside us was dark and calm. No fireballs rose now. No crowd cheered. Only water moved under the moon. Before we parted, Somchai said, "Tomorrow, I take you to old man who knows more stories." "Older than you?" He looked offended for 1 second, then laughed. "Yes, much older. He remembers when this town was very quiet." "What will he tell me?" Somchai looked toward the river. "Why, the Naga is not only in river. Where else?" He tapped his chest lightly. "In people." Then he walked away with Molly beneath the yellow streetlights. I stood alone for a while. The Mekong moved beside me. For the first time, it no longer looked ordinary. Not because I had solved its mystery, but because I had stopped needing it to be ordinary. Chapter 3. The Story Beneath the Water. The following morning arrived with a gentle rain. Not the kind of rain that rushes people indoors. Not the kind that floods streets or rattles rooftops. This rain seemed content simply to exist. Tiny drops drifted from pale clouds and settled softly onto the Mekong. The river became silver. The sky became silver. Even the distant hills across the border seemed painted in shades of mist. I sat beneath the awning of a small riverside cafe, listening to water tap against the leaves of nearby trees. The owner brewed coffee slowly. No one appeared in a hurry. The entire town seemed to be breathing at a slower pace than the world I had left behind. Perhaps that was why stories survived here, because stories require time. And time, I was beginning to learn, was something the Mekong understood very well. Around mid-morning, Somchai arrived on his old motorbike. The engine sputtered once before falling silent. He removed his helmet and grinned. "Ready? For what?" "Old storyteller." "Ah." He nodded. "Today you listen more than write. That seems to be your advice every day." "Yes." He laughed, because foreigners always write before they listen. I could not argue. We rode through quiet roads lined with tamarind trees and rice fields still wet from rain. The farther we traveled, the smaller the roads became. Concrete turned to packed earth. Houses became fewer. Fields stretched farther. Buffalo stood lazily in shallow water. White birds followed them through the grass. Everything seemed wrapped in a calm green silence. Eventually, we arrived at a small village near the river. Children played barefoot beneath stilt houses. An old dog slept beneath a wooden staircase. The smell of wood smoke drifted through the air. Somewhere nearby, someone was cooking sticky rice. The scent felt comforting, familiar, even though I had never lived here. Somchai parked beside a large mango tree. He lives here. The house before us was simple, wooden, weathered, raised above the ground on sturdy posts. A man sat on the veranda. He looked older than anyone I had met in Nong Khai. His face carried deep lines. His hair was completely white, yet his eyes remained bright and alert, as if decades had passed over his body but somehow missed his curiosity. "This is Grandfather Bumi," Somchai said. The old man smiled. "Ah, the writer." His English was limited, but surprisingly clear. He motioned for us to sit. "Tea first," he said. "Story later." The tea arrived in small glasses, warm, slightly sweet, fragrant with herbs I could not identify. Rain tapped gently on the roof above us. For several minutes, no one spoke. And strangely, the silence did not feel uncomfortable. It felt natural, as if conversation here was something that arrived when ready, not something people chased. Finally, Bumi looked toward the river. "You come for Naga?" "Yes." "You want answer?" I smiled. "I think I did. And now?" I considered the question. "Now I'm not sure." The old man laughed softly. "Good." That was the second time I had heard that response. Perhaps uncertainty was considered healthier here than certainty. Bumi folded his hands. "When I was young, old people told stories every evening." He pointed toward the river. "No television, no internet, only stories." I opened my notebook, but before I could write, he raised one finger. "Listen first." I closed it again. He nodded approvingly. Then he began. "Long ago, before borders, before maps, before governments, people along the Mekong believed the river connected worlds. The rain continued falling. The village seemed to disappear into the mist. Even the children playing nearby had grown quiet." The old man spoke slowly. Each sentence carried the rhythm of someone who had told the same story many times. "The Naga lived beneath the water, not as animal, not as monster, something greater." His eyes moved toward the river. "Something ancient." He paused. "People respected the river because they believed life came from it. Fish, water, fertile soil, transportation. Everything depended on the river. When people depend on something," he continued, "they create stories to remember its importance." That sentence surprised me. It sounded almost academic, almost modern. Perhaps he noticed my expression. He smiled. "Story and truth are not enemies." I wrote that down immediately. Story and truth are not enemies. Bumi continued. "The Naga became symbol of protection." He pointed toward the village. "Protection of water, protection of community, protection of balance." The word balance lingered in the air. I looked around. The rain, the fields, the river, the homes, everything seemed connected somehow, not separated into neat categories, not divided into sacred and ordinary. Instead, life here felt woven together, the spiritual and practical sharing the same space, like roots beneath the ground, invisible but connected. Later, we walked down toward the riverbank. The rain had stopped. Mist still hovered above the water. The Mekong flowed quietly beside us. Bumi moved slowly but confidently, as though every step belonged to him. "This river changes," he said. "Sometimes flood, sometimes drought, sometimes generous, sometimes dangerous." He looked toward the water. "That is why people respect it." A fishing boat drifted past. The fisherman raised one hand in greeting. Bumi waved back. "You know," he said, "young people ask if Naga is real. And what do you tell them?" I ask a different question. "What question?" The old man smiled. "Is respect real?" I was silent. "Is gratitude real?" He continued. "Is community real?" The river moved softly behind him. Those things matter whether Naga exists or not. For a moment, I forgot about fireballs entirely. The old man wasn't trying to prove anything. He wasn't defending a belief. He wasn't arguing against science. He was pointing towards something deeper, the role stories play in human lives, how stories shape behavior, how stories preserve values, how stories remind people what deserves care. By afternoon, the village had grown warm again. Children chased each other through puddles. Women sorted vegetables beneath shaded porches. A rooster wandered confidently through someone's garden. Life continued. Simple, steady, unhurried. Bumi invited us to stay for lunch. His daughter prepared grilled fish from the Mekong, sticky rice, fresh herbs, spicy dipping sauce. We sat on woven mats and ate together. No one rushed. No one checked phones. Conversation drifted naturally. At one point, I asked whether everyone in the village believed in the Naga. Bumi laughed. No. Really? Of course not. His daughter smiled. Some believe strongly. Some believe a little. Some not at all. Same everywhere. That answer surprised me. Perhaps I had imagined a village where everyone shared identical beliefs. But reality was more complicated and more interesting. People differed, yet they still gathered, still participated, still respected one another. The festival was not only about agreement, it was about belonging. As the afternoon sun lowered, Bumi showed me an old photograph. The picture had faded with age, black and white, worn at the corners. It showed villagers sitting beside the river decades earlier. No stage, no tourists, no cameras, just people waiting. Festival? I asked. He nodded. Long time ago. I studied the image carefully. The faces looked calm, almost identical to the faces I had seen the night before. Generations separated by decades, yet connected through the same ritual. The same river, the same waiting. I suddenly realized something. The fireballs might last only a few seconds, but the tradition surrounding them had lasted far longer. The lights themselves were brief. The community they created was enduring. That evening, I returned once more to the riverside promenade. The festival felt larger now. More visitors had arrived. Food stalls glowed beneath strings of lights. Musicians played softly nearby. Children carried snacks. Grandparents unfolded mats. The smell of grilled fish drifted through the air. And beyond everything, the Mekong waited. Dark, wide, patient. I found my place near Somchai and Mali. Tonight felt different. Not because the river had changed, because 3 days earlier, I had arrived wanting proof. Now I found myself appreciating the waiting itself, the conversations, the memories, the stories, the shared experience. The fireballs had become part of a much larger picture. The crowd gradually quieted. Night settled over the water. The sky deepened into black velvet. Stars appeared above the river. Then, without warning, a red light rose from the darkness. Small, bright, silent. A second followed moments later. Then a third. The crowd murmured softly. Some smiled. Some bowed their heads. Children pointed excitedly. And for a brief moment, everyone shared the same sense of wonder. Not certainty, wonder. The lights vanished quickly, but their effect remained. As we sat together beside the river, I remembered something Bumi had said earlier. Story and truth are not enemies. Perhaps that was why the mystery endured. Not because people refused explanations, but because explanations alone could never replace meaning. The river continued flowing. The lights continued appearing. The stories continued living. And somewhere between belief and skepticism, between history and mystery, between fact and feeling, the Mekong held space for all of it. Later that night, as the crowd slowly dispersed, Somchai looked at me and smiled. You understand more now? A little. He nodded. A little is enough. Then he pointed downstream. Tomorrow, we go farther along the river. To see more fireballs? Maybe. His smile widened. Or maybe to learn why people return every year even when they don't see any. I looked toward the dark water. The question lingered in my mind long after the last lights disappeared. Because perhaps the greatest mystery was not why the fireballs rose. Perhaps it was why people kept coming back. And tomorrow I would begin to understand. Chapter 4, Why They Keep Returning. The fourth morning arrived wrapped in fog. The Mekong had disappeared again. Not completely, only enough to remind everyone that some things reveal themselves slowly. From the balcony of my guest house, I could barely see the water. The river seemed to have dissolved into the sky. A fishing boat emerged briefly from the mist, then vanished again, as if the river itself were breathing. I stood there for a long time with a cup of coffee warming my hands. Back home, I would have called this weather gloomy. Here, it felt peaceful, perhaps because nobody seemed eager to fight it. Nobody complained. Nobody rushed the fog away. They simply accepted that some mornings belonged to mist, and some questions belonged to mystery. After breakfast, Somchai arrived as usual. This time, he carried a small basket. Inside were sticky rice, grilled fish, boiled eggs, and sliced mango. A picnic? I asked. He nodded. Today we travel along the river. Far? Not too far. Enough to learn something. That answer could have meant almost anything. By now, I had learned not to ask for details. The best lessons in Nong Khai seemed to arrive unexpectedly. We drove north along the Mekong. The road curved beside the water. Occasionally, the fog opened, revealing broad stretches of river glittering beneath the morning sun. Then it would close again. Fields stretched endlessly beside us. Rice swayed gently in the breeze. Water buffalo grazed quietly. Small shrines appeared beneath large trees. Children cycled to school. The world felt calm, balanced, unhurried. Eventually, we stopped near a small riverside village. Unlike the festival area, this place was almost silent. No crowds, no vendors, no tourists. Only the river and the people who lived beside it every day. An elderly woman sat weaving baskets beneath her house. Nearby, a fisherman repaired a net. A group of children played near the riverbank, skipping stones across the water. The scene felt timeless, as though life here moved according to rhythms older than roads and schedules. Somchai spread the picnic beneath a large tree. The leaves whispered softly above us. The river moved steadily below. For a while, we ate in silence. Then I asked the question that had been growing in my mind. Why do people return every year? Somchai smiled. I was wondering when you would ask. He placed his tea on the ground. You think they come for fireballs, don't they? Some do. He nodded. But not most. I looked surprised. He laughed softly. You still think like writer. What does that mean? You think story is event. He pointed toward the river. But life is relationship. I frowned slightly. He continued. Many people come back because their parents brought them. A pause. Then they bring their children. Another pause. Then, one day, their children bring grandchildren. The wind moved through the grass. Somewhere nearby, a bird called out. It becomes family memory, he said. Like Christmas? His face brightened. Yes, like Christmas. The comparison helped me understand. Millions of people celebrate holidays without asking whether every detail is historically accurate. The celebration itself matters. The gathering matters. The shared memory matters. Traditions survive because they connect people, not because they solve mysteries. The realization settled quietly inside me. Across the river, clouds drifted slowly above Laos. The fisherman nearby continued repairing his net. Life moved forward, steady, simple, human. A little later, we walked through the village. Many of the older residents remember decades of Naga Fireball festivals. Some believed deeply. Others were uncertain, yet almost all returned every year. One elderly woman told me, when I was a child, my grandfather carried me on his shoulders. She smiled at the memory. Now my grandchildren sit beside me. Do you always see the lights? She laughed. No. Then why return? Her eyes softened. Because my grandfather is there. I looked confused. She pointed toward her heart. Not there. Then toward the river. Here. Suddenly I understood. The festival had become a bridge across generations. A place where memories remained alive. A place where people could feel connected to those who had come before, even after they were gone. Later, another villager shared a similar story. My father never missed a year, he said. When he died, we continued coming. Because he believed? The man shook his head. Because he loved it. That answer stayed with me all afternoon. Not because he believed, because he loved it. Love, memory, belonging. These were the things bringing people back. The fireballs were only part of the story. By late afternoon, we reached a small temple overlooking the river. The temple was quiet. Few visitors came here. The view stretched endlessly across the Mekong. The river curved through the landscape like a silver ribbon. Monks swept fallen leaves from stone paths. Wind bells chimed softly. Everything felt peaceful. A young monk invited us to sit beneath a pavilion. We watched the river together. After some time, I asked him, "Why do you think people return every year?" The monk smiled. "For the same reason people visit old friends." The answer felt strangely perfect. The river was familiar, reliable, constant, even as everything else changed. People returned because returning itself brought comfort. A familiar road, a familiar place, a familiar story. The monk looked toward the water. Modern life moves fast. I nodded, very fast. People become tired. The breeze moved through the pavilion. Sometimes traditions help people remember who they are. Those words settled deeply within me. Remember who they are. Perhaps that explained much more than the mystery of the fireballs. The festival gave people an anchor, a reminder of family, of community, of history, of place. As evening approached, we returned to Nong Khai. The town was preparing for another night beside the river. Food stalls opened. Children laughed. Families carried mats toward the promenade. The familiar smells returned. Grilled fish, sticky rice, charcoal smoke, sweet coconut desserts, and beneath everything, the scent of the river itself. I felt oddly happy, not excited, not eager, simply content. For the first time since arriving, I no longer felt like an outsider looking for answers. I felt like a guest being welcomed into a tradition. The crowd gathered once more. Thousands of faces turned toward the water. The sky darkened slowly. Orange became purple. Purple became blue. Blue became black. And then there was only the river, waiting. The crowd grew quieter. A child yawned. An elderly couple shared a blanket. Teenagers whispered. Grandparents smiled. Nobody seemed impatient. Nobody demanded proof. Nobody demanded certainty. They simply waited together. And suddenly I realized something. The waiting itself had become sacred. Not because it guaranteed a miracle, but because it created space. Space for conversation. Space for family. Space for memory. Space for wonder. The world rarely gives people such space anymore. Phones buzz. Schedules fill. Deadlines arrive. Everything pushes forward. Yet beside the Mekong, thousands of people willingly sat still, watching water, watching darkness, watching possibility. Then, from somewhere downstream, a red light appeared. It rose silently, glowing against the black surface. The crowd inhaled together. The light climbed higher, then disappeared. Another followed moments later. Then another. Beautiful, brief, mysterious. Yet tonight, I found myself watching the people as much as the lights. Their faces glowed softly. Children leaned against parents. Grandparents smiled gently. Friends pointed toward the river. The lights rose and vanished. But the people remained, together, and for the first time, I understood something important. If the fireballs never appeared again, many of these people would still return. Because the true tradition was not the lights. The true tradition was gathering beside the river, remembering stories, sharing food, passing memories forward, and feeling connected to something larger than themselves. Long after the final fireball disappeared, the crowd lingered. Nobody seemed eager to leave. The river continued flowing beneath the stars, quiet, patient, ancient. As Somchai and I walked home, he glanced at me. "You look different." "How?" "Less interested in proving things." I laughed. "Maybe." He nodded. "Good?" Again, that word. Good. We walked in comfortable silence. The river moved beside us. The stars reflected softly on its surface. Tomorrow would be my final full day in Nong Khai. And Somchai had promised one last story. The story, he said, that explained why the Naga remained alive in modern Thailand. Not only in rivers, not only in temples, but in the hearts of people who had never even seen a fireball. As we parted beneath the streetlights, I found myself looking forward to it. Not because I expected answers, but because I had learned that some of the most valuable journeys begin when certainty ends. Chapter 5. The Naga in People's Hearts. My final morning in Nong Khai arrived quietly. No dramatic sunrise, no special event, no sudden revelation waiting beside the river. Only the soft golden light of dawn spreading across the Mekong. The water moved as it always had, slowly, patiently, without concern for visitors arriving or departing. I stood alone on the promenade. The festival crowds were gone. Food stalls had disappeared. Plastic chairs had been folded away. The riverbank felt almost empty. And yet, somehow, it felt fuller than before. Because now I could see things I had missed when I first arrived. An old man feeding fish. A woman sweeping fallen leaves. Monks collecting alms. Children cycling to school. The rhythm of everyday life. The river had never belonged only to the festival. The festival belonged to the river, and the river belonged to the people. The realization felt simple, but important. After breakfast, I met Somchai and Mali one last time. We sat beside their stall drinking coffee from small paper cups. Neither seemed interested in discussing fireballs. Instead, we talked about families, food, weather, rice harvests, small things, ordinary things. And perhaps that was fitting, because the deeper I explored Thailand, the more I noticed that extraordinary things often grew from ordinary roots. Eventually I asked, "So what is the final story?" Somchai smiled immediately. "I knew you would ask." Mali laughed. "He has been waiting all morning." "Of course," I said. "You promised." Somchai nodded. Then he looked toward the Mekong. "The final story is not about the river." No. Not about fireballs? No. Not about proving anything? He laughed. Definitely not. For a moment, he remained silent, watching the water, listening to the wind. Then he spoke. When people talk about Naga, foreigners often imagine giant serpent. I nodded. That was me. Yes. He smiled. But for many Thai people, Naga becomes symbol. A symbol of what? He thought carefully, then answered, "Things beneath the surface." The phrase immediately reminded me of our conversation days earlier. Power beneath calm water. Now, perhaps there was more. What kind of things? I asked. Somchai folded his arms. Respect, patience, faith, gratitude, connection. One by one, the words settled between us. Those things are hard to see, he continued, but they are important. Mali nodded, like roots under a tree. I looked toward a large riverside tree nearby. Most of its roots were hidden underground, invisible, yet they supported everything above. The leaves, the branches, the shade. Without roots, none of it would exist. Perhaps stories worked the same way. Perhaps culture worked the same way. Perhaps communities worked the same way. Later that day, Somchai took me to a temple overlooking the Mekong, the same temple where I had spoken with the young monk earlier. The grounds were quiet. Only a few visitors wandered among the buildings. Wind bells chimed softly. The scent of incense drifted through the warm air. At the entrance stood a long Naga staircase, green scales, golden details, a body that seemed to flow like water. I stopped and looked at it carefully, really looked at it. Not as decoration, not as mythology, but as part of a language, a cultural language that communicated ideas through symbols. Protection, balance, connection, memory. The Naga was not merely a creature. It was a story carrying values forward through generations. Inside the temple, an elderly monk sat quietly near an open window. He greeted us with a warm smile. When Somchai explained that I was leaving tomorrow, the monk nodded. "You learned about fireballs?" "A little." "Good." I laughed. "Everyone keeps saying that." The monk smiled. "Because little understanding is safer than complete certainty." I thought about that. Perhaps certainty closes doors. Perhaps curiosity keeps them open. The monk pointed toward the river visible through the trees. Many visitors ask whether Naga exists. "And what do you tell them?" He folded his hands. "I tell them a story." Of course he did. I waited. "When people lose respect for nature," he said, "they damage rivers. When people lose gratitude, they waste gifts. When people lose connection, communities become weak." His eyes were gentle. So whether Naga exists physically is not my first concern. I understood immediately. The story mattered because of what it encouraged. Respect, care, humility, responsibility. The monk smiled. If a story helps people become kinder, it already has value. We sat quietly for a while afterward. No one felt the need to add more. The wind moved through the trees. Temple bells chimed softly. The river continued flowing below. Everything felt peaceful, balanced, complete. That evening, I returned to the Mekong one final time. The sky glowed orange, then gold, then deep purple. Boats drifted across the water. Birds crossed overhead on their journey home. The festival was finished. No crowds remained. Only a few locals sat beside the river, watching sunset, talking quietly, living ordinary lives. I found a bench and opened my notebook. For several minutes, I stared at the empty page. Then I began reading my notes from the week. Questions, observations, conversations, quotes, memories. And something surprised me. The most important entries had very little to do with fireballs. Instead, they contained words like patience, community, memory, respect, wonder, family, belonging. The mystery that had brought me to Nong Khai was still a mystery. Scientists continued offering explanations. Believers continued holding faith. Visitors continued debating. The river continued keeping its secrets. Yet somehow that no longer bothered me, because the deeper lesson had never been hidden beneath the water. It had been sitting beside the river all along, in the people. I remembered the elderly woman who returned because her grandfather had once carried her there, the fisherman who continued attending because his father loved the festival, the monk who valued meaning above certainty, Bumi telling stories beneath the rain, Somchai reminding me to listen before writing, Molly feeding everyone around her, the children staring at the river with wide eyes, the grandparents smiling quietly beside them. Perhaps that was where the Naga truly lived, not beneath the Mekong, but within relationships, within traditions, within the invisible threads connecting generations. The river suddenly reflected the first stars of evening, small lights appearing upon dark water. For a brief moment, they almost resembled the fireballs, tiny points of wonder rising from darkness. Then the surface shifted. The reflections disappeared, and the river continued onward. I closed my notebook. The journey was ending. Tomorrow I would board a train, return to Bangkok, eventually return home to England. Friends would ask me what I had discovered. Some would ask whether the fireballs were real. Others would ask whether I believed in the Naga. And for the first time in my life, I felt comfortable answering, I don't know, not because I had failed to find answers, but because I had found something more valuable, the ability to appreciate mystery without fear, to sit beside uncertainty without demanding immediate conclusions, to recognize that some traditions survive not because they prove something, but because they help people remember what matters. The sky darkened completely. The Mekong became a ribbon of silver beneath the moon. A cool breeze moved across the river. I stood and began walking back toward town. Halfway down the promenade, I turned for one last look. The river flowed quietly through the darkness, ancient, patient, endless. And in that moment, I finally understood the misunderstanding that had brought me here. Before coming to Thailand, I thought the story was about fireballs. I thought the mystery was the lights. I thought the question was whether a giant serpent truly lived beneath the river. But the real story was much gentler than that. The real story was about how people keep wonder alive, how families carry memories forward, how communities gather beside the same river generation after generation, how respect for nature becomes culture, how stories become bridges between the past and the future. And perhaps most importantly, how some of life's greatest truths do not arrive as answers. They arrive as invitations. Invitations to sit quietly, to listen carefully, to watch patiently, and to leave a little space in the heart for things we do not fully understand. The moonlight shimmered across the Mekong. The river whispered softly in the darkness. And somewhere within that vast, peaceful night, the ancient story of the Naga continued flowing onward, not only through water, but through people. And long after the fireballs had faded from the sky, that story remained, waiting for the next traveler, waiting for the next child, waiting for the next generation to sit beside the river and wonder. Good night. Thailand still holds countless stories waiting to be discovered. If you would like to continue this journey together, I hope to see you again in the next story from Thailand Through Eyes. And if there is somewhere in Thailand you wish to visit through story, leave your suggestion below. Perhaps our next journey will begin there.
you.